Undead and Married is a romantic vampire cozy mystery and is book one in Andy Lowe's Blood Bond Agency series. The series is published by Squabbling Sparrows Press and is also available in ebook and paperback.
Chapter 15. After her call to Dominik, the rest of the evening dragged for Eva. Every time there was movement outside, she tensed, both worried and hopeful that it was him. She needed to settle her nerves if she was fooling him into thinking she was after extra details to find his perfect life partner. However, he never arrived, and on retiring for the day, she was a nervous wreck, hyped up on caffeine-laced blood drinks and adrenaline. Despite all this, no sooner had she collapsed on her bed than she was comatose until the following evening. The next evening, her first rational thought was of Dominik. Would he visit tonight? Before she managed more than a sip of her evening meal, Lilith had exploded into her office, holding a memory stick up in triumph. Didi hovered close behind, her eyes glued to the small object. Straightening in her chair, Eva put her mug back down on the desk. Her entire focus was on the small black plastic device. "You've got something on Sebastian?" Lilith shook her head hard enough that if she was still human, she'd have put her neck out. Her long hair, weighted down with product, hadn't moved. Blast, Eva was hoping they would have something on Sebastian that she could use against him. She sunk back into the large chair. Standing next to her, Lilith vibrated with pent-up energy. "Sorry boss, I'm still working on that. This is better. I found a backup of the VMatch software." Eva was on her feet before she was even aware of having moved. "And it'll work, okay?" While not an IT expert, she knew that just because Lilith had found a copy of the software, that didn't mean it would be the latest version. It might be one of the early buggy ones they had trialed. And if it was one of those, it wouldn't be as good as her using her natural-born talents as a matchmaker. A shrug from Lilith had left Eva none the wiser. Didi hadn't looked confident either, causing Eva to frown. Didi was confident at the worst of times. To see her appear unsure was wrong on a heap of levels. "Didi, what is it?" The receptionist had dropped into the visitor's chair, wringing her hands together, unable to look Eva in the eye. Didi squirmed under Eva's scrutiny. "I was following George's orders." Eva hadn't let up on her examination of the receptionist, for all the good it had done with the woman still staring at the floor. To do what exactly? Even to her own ears, her words were harsh, measured, menacing. If, as she suspected, her woes were down to meddling by Didi and Georgia, then she had reason to speak so. Despite her vampiric hearing, Eva still had to ask Didi to repeat herself. She'd caught what the receptionist said, but was having trouble comprehending her grandmother would do this to her. Didi glanced up before repeating her admission. "She asked me to delete the software from your computer. She said it was time you stood on your own 2 feet if you were ever to take over the permanent running of the agency." Eva struggled over what to address first. That her grandmother had known about the software, or that she was being groomed to take over the family business. The latter wasn't a surprise, given her parents' inability to function on a day-to-day basis thanks to their ongoing love affair. Why would she do that? I suppose she was behind the theft of the Chronicle too? Eva shook her head, unable to believe her grandmother would be in cahoots with a lowlife like Sebastian Draco. Didi surged to her feet, the better-to-death stare Eva in the eye. "Your grandmother would never do such a thing. She wanted you to use the Chronicle to find matches. You take that back this minute." Didi stood rigid, hands on her hips and jaw angled. Eventually, Eva held her hands up in surrender. The last thing she needed was to get into a fight with Didi. This was for 2 reasons. First, she wasn't sure she would win, and second, she needed the woman's help to survive George's absence. I'm sorry. I panicked, okay?" As if Georgia would deal with a man like that. Didi marched out of the office, muttering to herself and slamming the door behind her. Lilith stared open-mouthed at the closed door before claiming the just-vacated visitor's chair. She then slid the memory stick across the enormous expanse of oak. "It's a cleanish copy. Fire it up and let me know if it works, okay?" Eva was torn between wanting to make peace with Didi and being eager to plug the memory stick into her laptop. She was desperate to see if she could access and use the program. In the end, the latter had proved irresistible. For all she knew, Dominik was already on his way to the office. Far better that she saw him when she had some idea of potential matches. It will also mean she can match Angel with anyone other than the Austrian venture capitalist. Eva was loath to have someone turned for expediency and to pander to the von Koenig girl's base desires. It didn't matter what a shark the guy was. The program took forever to load, the progress bar moving like magma. The delay didn't sit well with Eva, with her listening for movement outside. Every time a car drove into the square, she was on edge. She'd even jumped to her feet to look out the window, on hearing a vehicle that sounded fast and flashy. For sure, it was what Dominik was photographed climbing out of on arrival at exclusive nightclubs and vampiric society events. At long last, the program finished loading, and she started it up, entering all the details she could recall from Dominik's registration form. What was odd was that this had appeared to be most of them, with only a few gaps in the completed form. Even better was that it was none of those marked with a dreaded red asterisk. She just hit the enter button to call up the search results when the bell above the front door had jingled. She'd still been reading through the list on screen when her office door was opened to reveal Didi next to her dream man. And the one man she couldn't have. Eva jumped up at the same time as Lilith, even if the Welsh vampire was slow to leave. Much as she wanted to devour Dominik with her eyes, as Lilith was doing, Eva instead concentrated on projecting a professional image. This involved her throwing all her spare energy at it, although not so much that she left herself at risk. Count Zilonka, thank you for coming back in. Eva gestured to the visitor's chair. Can we get you a red stinger, perhaps? He raised an eyebrow at her being able to remember his drink from last time, and she bristled in response. Was he for real? He'd only been here a couple of nights back. It wasn't as if she could forget in that short a time. He dropped into the visitor chair, his relaxed state at odds with hers. That would be acceptable. Didi, who had still been hovering in the doorway, had hurried off to get his drink. While they waited for her return, Eva stared at her laptop screen to avoid looking at 6'2" of gorgeousness. The list of potential suitors on her screen was woefully short, with her knowing that at least 6 names were out of date. Whether they were dead or married, she deselected them, removing them from the list. Obviously, Lilith hadn't had time to update the online database by scanning social media and the various vampire publications. Eva was left with 5 potential matches. At least she hoped they were in the running. Just because she hadn't heard of their nuptials or them being dead rather than undead, didn't mean it hadn't happened. She needed to get out more if she was helping to run the agency, as Georgia wanted her to. It wasn't until Dominik had received his drink and the office door was closed on them that Eva had looked away from the screen of her laptop. How to broach the subject? There's been a development since I spoke to you last night. Dominik took the glass away from his mouth, the drink untouched. An infinitesimal incline of his head was enough for her to press on. Yes, well, it would appear we had enough information to plan some matches, after all. No point coming clean about why that was. The less the powerful vampire knew about the break-in, the better. After all, the Chronicle would have held his details even before he set foot in the agency. His dark brown gaze never left her as he put the drink to his lips, taking a long draught and then swallowing. It was an action she couldn't help but replicate, and something that had his mouth quirking up to one side. She swallowed again. He put the glass down on the desk and leaned toward her. Odd, but this time she wasn't able to sense any energy coming off him at all. It was as if there was a wall between them, and it wasn't one that she'd erected. Strange, but she didn't think he was responsible either. Still, with the barrier in place, at least she could think straight. If his energy were to brush against her as it had during their first meeting, she doubted she could speak. He tipped his head to the side. And? Oh, right. Okay, not firing on all cylinders, even with the mystery block between them. We have 5 potential candidates for your consideration. His eyes widened before he mouthed 5, appearing surprised, although Eva couldn't work out if this was because he was expecting more or fewer names to be presented. She hoped it was fewer because at least this way, she was over-delivering. After clicking on the first profile, she turned her laptop so Dominik could see it. Eva had met the girl when out and about, and she should be a good match. And yet the tingling atop Eva's head was telling her no. She was about to find out if what Georgia said about the abilities that they shared was true. Chapter 16. It didn't take long to see that Dominik shared her reservations about the first candidate. After briefly scanning the contents on the screen, he straightened. No, definitely not. Next. This rejection continued with the other 4 candidates. That Dominik was familiar with all the women was clear by him asking nothing further about any of them. If his reputation was right, he had dated the lot of them already. This was a disaster. Is this some sort of joke? If it was one Dominik wasn't finding funny. Of the 5 partners you've put forward, 2 are married, another recently staked, and the other immolated by her ex-husband to save on alimony. And the 5th, said Eva, hoping there was still one candidate in the running. He didn't answer straight off, instead taking the time to drain the remains of his drink. Do I need to give a reason for not wanting to be tied to someone for the rest of my days? Eva's worried mind wanted her to shout yes. She couldn't, because she didn't blame him for being choosy. It would be different if his match were being dictated by Natalia Zilonka. Without that pressure, she understood he wanted to be particular. She knew she would be the same when it came time for her to wed. If that ever happened. Eva's mind was now in a familiar death spiral of worry. She thought that with the software back on her computer, her fears would be over. Why did she use it without an online scan first? She couldn't afford to mess up like this again, or she would be in danger of losing a powerful client. The agency's reputation would be in shreds if that were to happen. Despite the directive that his searching for his own match remained confidential, it would get out. It always did. Vampires were notorious for gossip. Her heart jammed in her throat. Eva still opened her mouth to speak. It was an enormous risk, but worth it. With Dominik now on his feet, ready to leave, she had nothing to lose. There is another way I can help find ideal candidates for you. She wasn't sure if it was the timbre of her voice thanks to her throat closing up, but he must have picked up on her nerves. His eyes darkened to the point she could see nothing else. Had she bitten off more than she could chew? 2 hours later, and Eva wished she'd kept her mouth shut. Better to face her grandmother than be stuck in a high-end sports car with a vampire in possession of that much testosterone. Her being there without Didi's knowledge only added to the bad feeling. And what had happened to the invisible barrier between her and Dominik when they were in her office? It was as if someone had ripped it away, leaving her at the mercy of his compelling personality. But being a De Silva, there wasn't a chance she was backing down now. If going out on the town with Count Zilonka was what it took for her to get him hitched, then so be it. It soon became apparent the software was a bust, at least until Lilith updated the database. And that sort of work could take days if not weeks, leaving Sebastian to pick away at their client base. Meantime, she had to find Dominik a life partner, and sort out Angel von Koenig, and all while working on the retrieval of the Chronicle. The first place she was looking would be Sebastian's principal home, in the hills behind the town. And she sure wasn't going there on her own. The rumors about what went on up there were enough to curl her fine silver hair. No, she would have Didi along for that outing, even if their relationship was strained. Eva turned away from the side window to stare through the windscreen. Take a left up here. He did as he was told, not bothering to slow. After ungluing her face from the passenger window, Eva speared him with a look designed to coagulate blood for all the good it did. The smile flickering around his beautiful mouth said he'd done it on purpose, to get a reaction out of her. His application of the brakes when they arrived at the bar was just as robust, with the seatbelt digging into her chest. Again she glared at him. Next time I'll drive. He swiveled in his seat. Next time? Eva didn't know what to make of his response, with his words flat and lacking inflection. To avoid taking anything for granted, she stayed silent, focusing on unclipping the seatbelt and helping it rewind. Anything was better than watching him examine her. And she knew he was looking. His scrutiny had a physical presence. It was one she both welcomed and rejected. Thankfully, he got out of the car, leaving her to wait for him to walk around and open the door for her. At least she hoped he would, because he was taking his own sweet time. She gripped the handle, having decided she would need to exit on her own when he opened the door. His phone was hard up against his ear, his responses restricted to a series of half-sentences and ahas. Dominik was still on the call when they reached the parking meter, where he patted his pockets with his free hand. On seeing him come up empty, Eva rummaged around in the side pocket of her purse. She located a couple of coins that she handed to him. A slight widening of his eyes was all she got in thanks as he plugged them into the antiquated machine and turned the handle. It would appear he was like her, knowing it was far easier to feed the meter than to have Captain Hugo writing you a ticket. No free parking in the evening in Milota. Some overzealous officer had even slapped Eva with a parking fine at 3 in the morning. Perhaps it was because the money went straight into the captain's rather deep pockets that he was vigilant in this one area of policing. Despite listening in, Eva couldn't hear who Dominik was speaking to. This told of the volume on his phone being set low enough to stop her or any other vampire from eavesdropping on his conversations. It wasn't until they entered the portico at Arabella's that Dominik finished the call and slid the phone into the inside pocket of his jacket. Eva waited for him to open the door to the bar before leading the way in. She didn't think he'd been here before, if his last-minute reaction to that corner was any indicator. Despite catering to the vampire set, the establishment was rather traditional and not at all suited to his renowned playboy tastes. The biggest risk of bringing him here was news of their visit making its way to Georgia in Greece. While there was an unspoken rule that BBA staff shouldn't date clients, she knew there was an even bigger one. And that was that she should have nothing to do with the Zilonkas. "Is everything okay, Ms. De Silva?" Dominik was closer than she realized, his warm breath brushing against her scalp, causing her to tense up. The heat emanating from his body had his cologne wafting in her direction, brushing against her libido like static electricity. She jerked her head to the side to put some distance between them. Her own personal barrier wasn't strong enough to stop her heart from racing, betraying her cool exterior. Despite her efforts to distance herself, she couldn't ignore the overwhelming physical presence of Dominik so close to her. Yes. Why wouldn't it be? Despite asking, she wasn't expecting him to answer. And anyway, she suspected he already knew. Could her nerves be so much on show that he could tell without having to scan her energy? She was flooded with relief when he didn't answer, instead saying, "Come, it's a beautiful night. Let's sit outside." This told her two things. He had been here before. And he didn't want anyone listening in on them. Inside, the tables were close together, with conversations blending with one another thanks to the hearing abilities of most of the clientele. Outside, the tables were far apart, interspersed with greenery and walls, providing an altogether more private setting. Eva was torn. There were pros and cons to sitting outside with the desirable vampire. Yes, they could talk without fear of being overheard. However, it would also see her very much on her own with him. She wasn't sure if her concerns were because of her distrusting him or distrusting herself. Dominik led her farther and farther away from the bar proper, not slowing until they arrived at a table looking out over the valley. If there were any tables nearby, they weren't close. Eva listened, but couldn't detect the purr of voices. The murmur of the river coming up from the bottom of the valley was the only voice she could hear. A server called at their table and dropped off a bottle of bubbly and 2 glasses before Dominik spoke again. "I hope you approve of my choice," he said, picking up the pure white bottle. Eva hoped so too. He hadn't asked her what she wanted to drink. She didn't even see him put in an order and couldn't help but gasp when he filled their glasses. Instead of the pale gold she was expecting, the liquid was a dark red. He picked up the glasses and held one out to her. Rather than appear rude, she took it, being careful not to touch his hand. This didn't stop her heart from skipping in response to once again being close to him. She had to concentrate if she was getting him married to anyone other than herself. The idea of his being blood-bound to another slowed her heart and cooled her blood as no internal lecture ever could. It came close to boiling when Dominik took hold of her free hand and rubbed his thumb over her palm. She would pull her hand away if she could, but it was impossible. Even with every barrier taught to her in place, his energy raced through her body, holding her still. Her nerve endings zinged with no input from her, and in places that had never zinged before. He gently took her hand and guided it to the table. As he placed his on top of hers, palm to palm, the texture of the starched tablecloth stroked the back of her hand. Soon enough, their heartbeats were in sync, slow and steady, like the ticking of a clock. As their connection strengthened, a warmth spread throughout her body, calming her nerves and bringing a sense of peace. He then proposed a toast. To the dead. It wasn't what she was expecting, and in her shock at his harsh words, she came close to spilling her drink. Did he mean the dead or the undead? He showed that he'd picked up on her confusion when he proposed a different toast. To the undead. Long may we live as one. Eva wrinkled her brow. His toast was familiar. She'd heard it before somewhere. Despite racking her brains, she couldn't remember when. While lacking in enthusiasm, her return toast had to be convincing because he clinked his glass against hers, saluted her and took a healthy swig. Eva followed his actions to the letter, expecting to be drinking a combination of blood and water. It was neither. If she were anything other than vampire-born, it would be something that would have her very sick indeed. Instead, she savored the Shiraz before swallowing. She wasn't worried about feeling the effects of the alcohol, with her vampire metabolism able to deal with it as though it were soda. At least, that was what would usually happen. Tonight it would appear the universe had other plans. Her world was now in soft focus as she stared at the gorgeous vampire on the other side of the table. Had he slipped something into her drink? She shook her head to clear it. He couldn't have. He poured both glasses at the same time. She would have noticed if he put something in her drink. Wouldn't she? Or was it she so besotted with this charismatic man, it had shredded her ability to observe something this obvious? Unless whatever had her befuddled was in her glass before it arrived at the table. Eva dragged her hand out from under his. She slammed her wineglass down, smashing the stem, with her wine staining the snow-white tablecloth. She reached for the carafe of water, her actions jerky and out of her control. Normally, she would have been able to pick it up with one hand. Tonight, she was forced to use both for fear of dropping the fragile glass vessel. It took all her concentration to fill her water glass and put the carafe safely back down. It was also an effort to lift the glass of water and drain it. Not helping was Eva's senses still swimming. She refilled her glass and downed that too. Again, it made no difference. She was still woozy, her emotions were out of whack, and she wasn't fully in control of her body. Was this how alcohol affected humans? Dominik made a point of finishing his glass of Shiraz and put it down carefully on the table. He examined Eva to the point she was squirming. While her brain said run, her legs weren't up to the challenge. What have you done? Despite the brevity of her question, it took all her concentration to force the words around a tongue that appeared to have doubled in size. Relax. It's nothing permanent. I prefer you tell me the truth. And I don't have time for you to come to your senses. People are dying. Eva's forehead wrinkled as she tried to make sense of his words. She wasn't any clearer when he spoke again. So gorgeous, Eva, is it you? Are you the killer? Eva's addled brain couldn't decide what to concentrate on. That he thought she was gorgeous, or that he thought she was a killer.
If you've enjoyed these chapters, we'd love it if you could give them a thumbs up. And if you'd like to continue the story, you can subscribe and tap the bell to be notified when the next chapter is released.